Hello?
All right, brother. Sorry about that. We looking good?
Yeah, no, that's my fault. My internet in the whole house went down.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like weather or what, but I'm sorry about that.
No, no worries. It happens.
Yep. Um, but yeah, like I was saying, I went to a spring training game yesterday. That was really cool. I have a question for you. When there's like a split squad, how do you decide which game to go to?
Whoa, that's a good question. So for me personally, I don't have to be at either one in particular. We're not doing radio broadcasts, at least not pre and post game shows during spring. So I tend to go to the games that are played at home at Salt River Fields, if that's the option, because then I get to walk around in the backfields and talk to a lot of the players that are there. I could go on the road with the team, but it's just as easy to be at home where a lot of the veterans stay as well. And that's kind of how they decide which players go on the road or stay home. Is a lot of the time you'll see the veteran guys stay at home and then they send some of the younger guys on the road, or maybe a couple guys who haven't been in a few days. So it is a bit of a balancing act that they have to put together to figure out who goes.
Yeah, so I'm guessing you're not traveling to Vegas with the team then?
No, I'm not going to Vegas this time. That would be pretty cool, but I just don't have like enough responsibility to feel the need to go right now.
Yeah,
But man, wouldn't that be cool to be in Vegas
that'd be
with
cool
the
to see a
Diamondbacks?
game too.
Yeah, it would be cool.
It's crazy though, because now we have two major league teams in minor league ballparks.
Yeah, with the A's in Sacramento and then Tampa Bay as well.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an interesting transitional year, and it'll be really intriguing to me to see how the rest of baseball kind of feels about that. I mean, obviously it's the home team that really matters, and those are going to be their confines for the year. But that is an interesting aspect of this season. Totally, is that we're going to be playing a lot of games in those ballparks.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how it all works.
Definitely. We go to Sacramento later in the season, if I'm remembering correctly, the Diamondbacks. So we'll get our first chance to take a look at what baseball in Sacramento looks like.
Dude, that's gonna be cool.
I hope so. I hope it'll be cool.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I have an interview of Steve Zinsmeister of the Diamondbacks. Thank you for taking time out of your day to do this with me.
Thanks, Isaac. I appreciate you asking me to do it, man. This is really cool.
Anytime. We're gonna be going over the Diamondbacks preview of the season, their players, who, and a bunch of stuff like that. Could you please tell me about your role with the Diamondbacks?
Yeah, so this is going to be my second season as the host of the pregame show and the postgame show on the radio. So I'm up in the booth with Chris Garagiola and Tom Candiotti when they do the games on the radio, and I get to be their lead-in. So I do half an hour before the game, and then we talk about after the game. We talk about what happened. It could be good, could be bad, but we're there nonetheless. And I get to go down on the field and interview the players after each game, and it's a really, really cool job, Isaac. And this year we're launching a podcast for the team as well called the D-backs Rattle On Podcast. You can find it at dbacks.tv. And I've already got like 8 episodes up there. They're interviews with all your favorite players and coaches and stuff like that. So we wanted to get into that space. We wanted to talk directly to the people on the team. And so that's what I do for this, for the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Dude, that's cool. I'll check out your podcast for sure.
Yeah, it's a cool new endeavor that we came up with over the off season. I basically go into the spring training complex and sit down and talk with basically anybody that I'm really interested in. And we've had 8 interviews so far. We've got a couple more that are in the pipeline, and they're really interesting conversations. So for right now, dbacks.tv, you can check all those interviews out, and then they get pushed to anywhere that you listen to podcasts 48 hours after that. So you can check it out anywhere.
Dude, that's cool. Um, so we're gonna start it off with some stats from the upcoming or from last year, and we're gonna try and guess the players. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
How about you throw one my way? Let's start there.
All right. This pitcher had an ERA of 6.23 with the 117 uh with the 117 innings pitched.
Okay, so an ERA over 6 and got a significant number of innings. So my first inkling is probably Jordan Montgomery.
Yep.
Yeah, I would have guessed that just because, 100 innings, I mean, that's got to be a starter, right? Can't be a
Yeah.
reliever. And Jordan just got off to a slow start and never really was able to get his feet under him during the course of the season.
That's not really his fault though, because he signed late and he didn't have a full spring training.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Isaac, I've talked with him here, or I've seen him around the clubhouse. I haven't had the chance to sit down with him yet, but he is in great shape. I know that that's something a lot of people say in spring, but in his case, it certainly looks the part. I mean, I don't think there's going to be anybody more motivated to have a good season than Jordan Montgomery because he's got a great track record.
Yeah.
And I would expect that he's going to show a lot of improvement from 2024 to 2025.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a great pitcher because every year before we signed him, he was a great middle of the pack starter. And then last year, he just got off to a slow start and continued.
Yeah, you want me to throw you a stat now?
Yeah.
All right. So here's the statistic, and you tell me which player it is, okay?
All right.
Name me the only Arizona Diamondback who finished last season with a batting average over 300.
I don't think it was Carroll because he started off slow. Was it Cattell Marte?
You would think, right? It's not Cattell. It's not Corbin Carroll either. Do you have any more guesses, or you want me to tell you?
Doc Peterson?
No, but that's a good guess. It's
Hi.
actually, say again.
I got one more guess, but I don't
Did
think
you have
it's,
another guess?
yeah. Eugenio Suarez?
Okay. That's another good guess, but it's not Gino Suarez either. No, it's actually the backup catcher, Adrian Del Castillo, who didn't play in the majors all year long, but man, was he good when he was up. He hit 313 for the season.
Dude, he was killing it then.
Sure was.
I still remember where I was when he hit that walk-off home run against the Phillies in the stadium.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I got the chance to interview him right after that game, and just it's so difficult in the context of being a rookie. I mean, you're already just focused on fitting in and getting to know people at the major league level, and let alone have to hit a baseball the way that he did right off the bat. So it was really, really cool.
Yeah. All right. I got two more for you, but we'll just keep trading off until we're out. Um, this pitcher had an ERA of 2.48 in 72.2 innings pitched with 91 strikeouts.
Wow. So really good ERA. It's a reliever, 70 innings. So relievers that had great years would be, I mean, AJ Puck was
He
fantastic
was
with the
great once he came
Diamondbacks.
over here.
Justin Martinez was really good
That's
and
the
struck
answer,
out a lot
so
of guys. Is it Justin Martinez?
yeah.
Yeah, I wondered if maybe it was him.
Because his fastball is so gross and then he has nasty off speed.
Yeah, and he really has an excellent sinker. I know it's sometimes it looks just like the fastball, but it's got that great diving action.
Yeah.
You got to remember too. I mean, I know he was the closer for a good chunk of last season, and he might be again this year. Justin Martinez is only 23 years old. I mean, that might be old compared to you, but uh, but let's be honest, that's still a really young player, and he's still
Yeah.
kind of finding his way with the Diamondbacks.
Martinez is a great pitcher, but the only thing he needs to work on is learning that 102 is just as good as 98 if it's in a good location, which is where I think Geraldo Perdomo comes in, because in big situations he settles him down.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great lesson that you've got right there for any pitcher to figure out is control. I mean, look at guys like Montgomery we talked about or Merrill Kelly who might only throw 93, 94 miles an hour, but if you put it right where you want it to be, that's dangerous. That's good pitching
Yeah.
right there. All right, let me throw you another one. Let's see. All right. So you obviously know that last year, the top two Diamondbacks in stolen bases were Corbin Carroll and Jake McCarthy. Those
Yep.
guys are speedsters, right?
Yep.
Who had the third most stolen bases for the Arizona Diamondbacks?
Let's see. Alec Thomas was injured too much. Who else was fast on the team? It wasn't Gattel, right?
Nope, not Cattell.
Perdomo?
Geraldo Perdomo, even though he spent some time early in the year on the IL, stole 9 bases. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you start adding up all of the numbers that these guys have, Geraldo Perdomo had the third most steals on the D-backs last year.
Dude, that does not surprise me. He's such a good ball player.
Yeah, he's incredible. I'm glad that they signed him to a contract extension. And you start to feel when you're in the locker room, I can tell you, he's so respected. You can have a good
Yeah,
time with him. You can joke around. He's a fun guy. But when it's time to get serious and buckle down, nobody's more respected than Geraldo Perdomo.
that's so cool. All right, my last one for you. This pitcher had a 4.71 ERA, and 181.2 innings pitched.
4.71, you said?
Yeah,
And how many innings?
181.2, so basically 181.
So the innings count actually gave this one away for me. That would be Brandon Pfaadt, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, I thought so. So I just talked with Brandon on the podcast actually a couple of days ago, and he pitched the most innings of any Arizona Diamondback last year because he was
Yeah.
the only one that didn't go on the IL at any point in time.
Yeah, we were so injury prone last year through our starter rotation, our starters on the field.
Yeah. Between Gallen, Kelly,
Erod,
Montgomery, Erod,
yeah,
and Nelson,
yeah.
344 days spent on the injured list.
Just in our rotation,
Just in those five guys.
jeez. That's
That's
like,
almost that's almost a whole year.
yeah, that's the thing. Like, I don't want to bring this up again because I'm still think about it sometimes. But like, if we had even half those guys on for half those days, I think we're at least winning one more game, and we don't have to wait on the Brewers and the Mets to play that doubleheader.
Yeah, it really came down to the wire, and we can all look back and say, "Hey, wish we could have had that game or
Yeah,
that game." But yeah, you're right. I mean, they faced a lot of adversity last year in the starting rotation. It's part of the reason that they're okay with having seven guys right now that could be in that rotation. I do not envy Torey Lovello for having to figure out which five are going to end up in the starting five for the beginning of the year.
yeah, for sure. Staying on that same page of the five. So let's say you go Burns, Gallen, Kelly, Erod, or Montgomery, whoever you want to flip, and then you have Ryan Nelson and Brandon Pfaadt. Do you think they're going to go with the seven-man rotation or send two guys down to AAA so they can still develop, and then in case like an injury happens, they can bring them up?
Yeah, it's the big question this spring, right? Or at least one of the big questions is
Yeah.
what do they do? And I'll tell you this, I do have a podcast episode up right now with the general manager Mike Hazen, and I asked him that exact question. Do you have a way to have all seven in the major leagues if they're all healthy, which we hope they are? I'll let you go listen to his answer on the podcast, and I talked about it with Torey Lovello as well, so you can check those out. But as for what I think could happen, I think that you're spot on with the top four for sure. Gallen, Burns, Kelly, and Eduardo Rodriguez are all going to be in the starting rotation. Um, in my conversations with Torey Lovello, doesn't sound like he likes the idea of a six-man rotation. It just sets guys on different routines than they're used
Yeah.
to. I don't expect that to happen. So then what do you do? Jordan Montgomery, certainly a guy like you said earlier, he's got a good reputation outside of what he did last year for the Diamondbacks. Brandon Pfaadt and Ryan Nelson, I'll tell you, I'm super impressed with them. And as I talk with other guys like Kelly and Gallen, like they're really impressed with those guys. Ryan Nelson might have been their best starting pitcher last year
In the
at
second
any
half.
given point.
Yeah.
Definitely over the course of the summer, he was their guy. So here's what I think could happen. And I have no inside info on this whatsoever, but I think it's those four we talked about. I think Jordan Montgomery right now is probably that fifth guy, although he still needs to he got in a little bit late because he was dealing with a finger issue. So hopefully he's okay by opening day. And then it's Fought and Nelson. What do you do with those two? I wouldn't be surprised if one of them ends up in the bullpen. Ryan Nelson has come out of the bullpen before. He did it in the World Series in
Yeah.
2023 and had one of his best games. He was also a closer at Oregon when he was in college. So he's got some experience there. But it's really about what they want to do with those seven guys. And they know they're going to need them to start games like you were talking about. What if they had those guys last year waiting in
Yeah.
AAA when they needed them? That would be such a nice thing to have. And so I think that there is value in keeping Nelson and or Fott in AAA if they have to, if you have to. And it's not that they belong there. It's just that they're kind of waiting in the wings for an opportunity. Those guys are so good. They're major league quality right now. I would hate to see them in the minor leagues, but I also think the Diamondbacks don't like the idea of changing guys' roles from reliever to starter and back again. They did that with Dre Jameson a couple of years ago, and his
Yeah.
arm blew out. And I'm not saying that that's the reason why, but I don't know if they like messing with that all that often.
Yep. All right, so that's all I got for you for the trivia. I think you have one more for me, right?
Yeah, no, I did write down one more. So you ready for it?
Yep.
Name me the Diamondback that played the most positions in the field last season, not including designated hitter.
So basically a super utility guy.
This player played 5 different positions in 2024 for the Diamondbacks.
My first answer is Kevin Newman because he filled in for Perdomo and the Cattell.
It is Kevin Newman. Not only did he fill in for Cattell and for Perdomo and some
He
other
played
guys as well, he
first too.
played third. He played first. You're right. He was a defensive replacement at first base a lot when Christian Walker got hurt, and he appeared in left field at one point.
Yeah, he's gonna fit good with that Angels team.
Yeah, I think that whoever ends up with that utility infield role for the Diamondbacks, it's super important. I mean, we saw what Newman's importance was to the 2024 squad. So I'm really interested. That's one of the other big things that I'm keeping an eye on when I'm out there at spring training is who's going to be that backup infielder.
Yeah. All right, so now I'm gonna go into players who have had a great spring so far, and I want you to let me know if you think they have a chance at making the team.
Okay.
So my first two players are Ildemar Vargas and Garrett Hampson. Um, just going off their stats, I think, do you think like those two guys will be one of the replacements for Kevin Newman while he's with the Angels?
Yeah, it's a great transition from our previous discussion, right? So Vargas, obviously has been a Diamondback before,
Yeah,
several times, and this organization, they love him. They love what he provides defensively. He can play shortstop. He can play anywhere else in the infield. He's been gone for a little bit. I think the Nationals most recently, and he played pretty darn well. And like you said, he's hitting the cover off the ball in spring training. So he'd be a really
yeah.
good option as that backup infielder. I think Garrett Hampson is in that same conversation. I don't know. Is there a way that they could both be on the team? I'm not sure about that.
That was my
Um,
next question. I was gonna say like, would you see Garrett at short and then Vargas at second?
the thing about Hampson, that I don't know if Vargas could do, is Hampson can play pretty much anywhere in the outfield as well. And he does
Mhm.
provide a little bit more speed. The Diamondbacks have never really needed a lot of speed because, like we talked
Yeah,
about earlier, they got a lot of guys that can swipe bags. So they don't do a lot of pinch running usually, but he would be a great option off the bench who can play anywhere in the infield. I mean, he's literally played anything but I think pitcher and catcher, and I'm just assuming he hasn't pitched. But then again, Pavin Smith pitched last year for the
yeah, that
Diamondbacks,
was
so.
crazy.
But no, I mean, I think Hampson has a great pathway to making this team right now, especially with Blaze Alexander on the shelf with an oblique issue. I actually talked to Blaze just a couple of days ago on the way out. He was on his way home, and I caught him on the backfields. He's doing really well, by the way, and starting to get some movement back into his workouts and stuff. But it's going to be a couple weeks, and he realizes that. But I think Hampson being able to play some outfield could be something that kind of propels him to maybe making the squad on opening day. But you're right about Vargas. They love Vargas, and
Yeah,
he's clearly a major league talent.
yeah, both guys are great options, so it's not a bad issue to have.
Yeah.
For our next player, Dre Jameson, he has an electric fastball and his slider is nasty.
Yeah, no, Dre is an awesome story. We talked about it a little bit earlier where, 2 years ago, he blew out his arm while kind of transitioning between reliever and starter.
Yeah,
He's been on the shelf with Tommy John surgery. I can tell you this, Isaac. Last year, I get the chance every day, or at least at home games, to sit in the office with Torey Lovello, and he and I get to have a one-on-one
dude,
conversation.
that's so cool.
And there were so many times, I'm telling you, often unprompted. I didn't even have to say anything about Dre. And Torey would say, I watched a bullpen that he threw at Salt River Fields while he was, rehabbing his arm. Or I'm getting reports from guys that, things are going really well with Dre. They're very excited about what he can provide. It's not that he didn't deserve to be here the last couple of years. He was just hurt.
Yeah,
And so
Tommy
I
John.
firmly believe if that injury didn't happen, Dre would be an established guy in this bullpen or maybe even in the starting rotation if
Yeah,
he hadn't have blown out his arm. So they're really excited about what he can provide in 2025.
if it's up to me, which it's not because I don't run the team, I'd rather see Dre in the bullpen because, like we mentioned earlier, we have a ton of already starting pitchers.
Yeah, no, and he totally would be if he's on the team on opening day, which I think he has a pretty good chance of, by the way, depending on what they do with those starters that we talked about. They have the surplus of starters that could find themselves in the bullpen. Remember, Jordan Montgomery was in the bullpen at the end of last season.
Yeah,
I don't know if they would go that route again. We talked about Nelson and Fott and where they fit. Bryce Jarvis is still kind of at that point where he and Dre are kind of in similar roles in my mind because we
is
know the back
Jarvis
end, right?
healthy?
That I don't know fully, but I mean, I've seen him around. I saw him in the clubhouse just yesterday, actually. But I mean, they have a lot of options, right? I mean, they just signed Kendall Graveman.
Yeah,
They've got Puck, Martinez, we talked about, Ginkle, Thompson. I mean, there's a lot of guys and not enough spots for all of them, but I would think Dre would definitely be in that conversation.
for sure, yeah. So mentioning all our bullpen arms, do you think the Diamondbacks are gonna go out and sign someone like a David Robinson or trade for like a Ryan Helsley as a closer? Or do you think it's gonna be someone on our roster like Justin Martinez, AJ Puck, Kevin Ginkle, or even a sneaky guy like Ryan Thompson with that weird sidearm?
Yeah, you know what's funny about that is I had a conversation with Ryan Thompson a couple of days ago on the podcast, so you can go check this out. I feel like he doesn't get mentioned ever
Yeah,
for the closer's role. That's usually Martinez, Puck, Ginkle, and now Graveman. And I asked Ryan straight up, do you want to be the closer? Do you want to be that guy? And he flat out told me, yeah. I mean, if you don't want to be the top guy, then what are you doing? So he's got the
yeah,
right motivation, and you should go check out that episode at dbacks.tv. But to your point, you have a lot of good options, right? So what are they going to do? I don't think that the team will go and spend on a free agent closer. We've seen the prices of those guys. Kirby Yates signed with the Dodgers.
yeah. I thought we had a
Um,
chance at Kenley Jansen, but then he went to the Angels.
Kenley Jansen's another good one. Tanner Scott obviously was a big one. Those guys are getting paid, double digits. So we're talking 10 plus million a
Yeah,
year. And this Diamondbacks team, as it's constructed right now, is the most expensive roster they've ever had. So I don't know that they want to spend that much money on a guy, as good as it would be to have one of those, like a Robertson or something. I think it's more likely to come via trade. And they do have surpluses in certain areas. Starting pitching, we've certainly talked about. Maybe even in the outfield, you could argue that there's a
Alec Thomas
surplus
and Jake
there.
McCarthy.
So I think it's more likely to come via trade. I don't know how many teams are looking to trade their closers during spring training, though. We're only, what, 2, 3 weeks away from the regular season.
Yeah,
So
20 days to opening day.
yeah, so I don't know how many teams are looking to trade their closers at this point. Here's what I think could happen. I would think that if they get a closer, it might have to be during the season, probably closer to the trade deadline. And maybe it is like a Helsley or somebody else becomes available. You never know. But I think they might have to go with somebody internal now and then possibly add somebody midseason.
Cool. For our next player, what do you think about Drew Jones' possibility of making the roster? Like you just mentioned, we have a lot of outfielders like Grichuk, Carroll, who else do we have out there? Alec Thomas, McCarthy. So outfield is not a problem, but Jones is a good player. So what would you think about him making the roster?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Isaac. So Drew Jones is 21 years old.
He's only
Uh,
that young.
Yeah, he's 21. He is, I think, most recently in high A ball. So he hasn't played at the upper levels of the minors yet, at least not that I can remember. So I think he's still got a ways to go before he's a major leaguer. But I can tell you this from watching him as recently as last night, if you watched the Diamondbacks game, he's got major league tools all over the place. He can be
Yeah,
a starting center fielder for the major league club right now. He could. I think he's bound to be as good of a fielder as Alec Thomas. And I think Alec Thomas is maybe one of the best outfielders in the game right now in
yeah.
terms of fielding ability. And so he's got the speed, he's got the glove, he's got the arm. In those ways, he inherited a lot of that from his dad.
Andrew Jones,
Um,
yeah.
but the bat, I mean, it still needs some work. He needs to face upper levels of competition. Those are still things that he has to work on. So, my indirect answer to your question, no, I don't think he's going to make the major league team, not just yet, but he's a Diamondback of the future. I mean, that's a
Yeah,
guy that you should look forward to. And if Jordan Lawler makes the jump to the
that's the
major
next
leagues at
player.
some point this year, then Drew Jones becomes the next big thing waiting in the wings.
For sure, yeah. For our last player, or second to last, I guess, Jordan Lawler, like you just mentioned, do you think he has a chance at making the roster? I know it's tough though, because they have Suarez at third. I don't think he's moving with his bat and his defense. And then Perdomo, who they just locked up, they have Cattell at second.
Yeah, no, great questions about Lawler. So he's played mostly shortstop in the minor leagues. He's actually gotten a decent amount of playing time between double and triple A, although last year he didn't play much at all because of injuries.
And yeah,
You'll remember he got called up right before the postseason in
against the
23, but
Cubs.
he didn't really play much. They didn't really need him all that much, to be
Yeah,
honest, at the time. And he's super young still, too, but he fits the bill. I'll tell you this. If it was just about talent level, he would be that backup infielder we talked about earlier over guys like Hampson and Vargas and maybe even Blaze Alexander. I think he's probably more talented than most of the crop. However, they don't want him to come up and sit on the bench 4 or 5 days a week.
and not
They want him
develop
to
in the
play every day.
minors.
They want him to play every day.
Yeah,
And so it's, I don't know. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think that certainly he's opened some eyes as recently as last night. He had a really impressive game. So he's a great player. He could be a major league shortstop, third baseman. I think he could even be a second baseman down the line, depending on what they need. But I think that they're kind of grooming him to be the next man up if and when they need him. God forbid Perdomo get injured again, then he's the guy.
yeah,
If Gino Suarez for some reason is down, or if for the future he's not around, Jordan Lawler's waiting in the wings. So his time will certainly come. I just don't know if it'll be on opening day or not.
cool. And then for our last player, Yilbert Diaz, who's a young pitcher. He came up last year, and I think he gave up 2 runs in his first two starts combined. Uh, what do you think he has about him making the roster?
Yeah, he's a really interesting case and a really interesting story if you don't know a lot about Gilbert Diaz. But he did come up last year. I think he made 4 starts, if I remember right,
I
two
think
of
it was
which were
three, but
three. Okay, I remember two of them being really good
the
and
Blue
one maybe
Jays and the
not so good.
Braves,
But
yeah.
he's got a really good fastball, 97, 98 miles an hour, so he's got some giddy up there. His curveball is really dirty, and it's a slower looping curve in my opinion, so it does have a very large gap in speed between that and his fastball. He's still super young too. I don't think he will make the major league team. That's mostly because of the depth you mentioned at starting pitcher. They don't really have a need for a guy as young as him right now.
Yeah,
He's still got a chance in AAA this year to be really, really good and potentially pitch some innings in the major leagues this year. It probably won't be on opening day. I just don't think they have the room for him right now. I mean, if we're talking about potentially putting Ryan Nelson in the bullpen or in the minors or Brandon Pfaadt, then Gilbert, unfortunately, he doesn't fit right now. But
yeah,
last season, I don't think anybody knew who this kid was, and then he comes out of nowhere and he shows that he could definitely pitch at the major league level. So, yeah, I think we'll probably see him again at some point this year. I'm hoping we do. I just don't know what that's going to look like and when.
yeah. I don't know if you saw it yesterday, but the thing is, the stuff is there for him because he absolutely carved up Julio Rodriguez in an at bat.
Yeah, that's a heck of a guy to strike out, and that's a real good line item on a resume.
For sure. So now we're gonna preview the roster, starting with first base. So we lost Christian Walker to the Astros, unfortunately. Great clubhouse guy, great bat, great glove. And then we gained Josh Naylor, who's another great clubhouse guy. His defense is solid, and his bat, he just crushes baseballs.
Yeah, well, Josh Naylor. So I got the chance to sit down with him his first day with the team. He's a really soft-spoken guy in a lot of ways, but then you get him on the field and he just erupts and he's emotional and he's a leader
It
in
was
it
crazy.
it kind of reminds me of Jock Peterson in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
If you talk to Jock Peterson off the field, you're like, man, it's really hard to have a conversation. Like he's such a different guy. But then you get him on the field and playing the game and they change and they're just a totally different person. So really excited to see what Naylor does at first base. The glove, while it's certainly nobody is Christian Walker, let's be honest.
No, 3 Gold Gloves in a
Um,
row for Walker.
yeah, nobody's as good as that. But I'll tell you this, Josh Naylor was really good for a couple of years there at first base. Fell off a little bit last season. So if he can get back to his roots of playing solid defense at that position, the Diamondbacks are an organization that values defense more than any other team. I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
And so I trust in them to coach him up really well. I think he's going to show improvement in that side of his game. And when it's not Naylor, I suspect that Pavin Smith is going to get some opportunities to play first base as well.
cool. Moving on to second base. I mean, Barn. Unless an injury happens, it's going to be Ketel Marte's position to lose. But like we mentioned earlier, you could have Ilmar Vargas or even Jordan Lawler or Garrett Hampson filling in behind him.
Yeah, well said. I think you've got it spot on there. That spot is Catel's to own as long as he wants to play there. I do think there's a chance that they try to get him a couple extra DH days this season,
Yeah, I heard
especially
about
against.
that. Is that just to get him off his feet so he doesn't have that injury, even though it wasn't his fault like last year?
Well, it's always about trying to keep guys as fresh as possible, right? I mean,
Especially with a superstar like Ketel.
yeah, and they used to do that a lot. Remember when he played center field for a time for the
Yeah,
Diamondbacks? They tried to
that's
get him off his feet. Second base isn't as taxing on the body, but it's still a very athletic position, and he plays it very athletically. So
yeah,
yeah, it's less about, injuries for me and more just about getting him in the games as much as they can because last year I would argue he was the third best player in the National League behind Shohei Ohtani and Francisco Lindor. And if he
yeah.
doesn't miss that month in
He wins
August, I guess it would have
MVP.
been, he might be in the MVP conversation
Yeah.
with Ohtani, who had one of the best seasons ever.
Yeah, even with that injury, he still finished second ahead of Lindor.
Yeah, pretty crazy. So yeah, you've got that spot down. It's 100% Marte.
Yep. And then moving on to third base, you have Eugenio Suarez or Gino Suarez, as I like to call him. Um, again, I think it's his position to lose, but let's say he goes down for an injury, it could be again Garrett Hampson, any of the guys that we mentioned for second.
Yeah, and I know that Blaze Alexander was getting some work at third base before he ended up with the oblique injury this week. So, once he's back and healthy, and he might start the year in Reno, but I suspect we'll see Blaze at some point. He could play some third. He's got a really good, strong arm. The thing about Gino that I'll tell you, first of all, he's a lot like Perdomo in that Gino is the kind of guy who likes to pull pranks in the clubhouse. He's fun. He likes to be loud and boisterous. But when it's time to get down to business, it's, Gino is well respected. So, and he's just so consistent. If you watch him field, he's very fluid with his arm motion. Every time he fields a ground ball, no matter where it's at, it looks the same. And usually he hits the first baseman right in the chest. So he makes things really easy at first baseman as well. So yeah, it's Gino. And like you said, if you need a backup plan, I would think Lawler would be waiting in the wings, but like you said, you've got a lot of backup infielders that you can go to.
Yeah, the Diamondbacks do not have a problem with depth, whether it's in their rotation or their lineup.
Yeah, this is one of the deepest teams they've ever had.
Yeah. Moving on to shortstop, again we have Geraldo Perdomo, who I think it's his position, but especially with that contract extension he got. But again, we can have Lawler fill in for him, Garrett Hampson, even like a guy that we haven't mentioned yet that's in the lower minors, like Tommy Troy. So
Yeah, Tommy Troy, I could envision down the road. He's played some second base as well, I believe. So like there's an option there. I don't know if you saw the D-backs top 30 prospects list came out just the
yeah,
other day. Demetrio Crisantes is a guy who plays second base a lot and is also kind of a shortstop. Everybody is a shortstop when they when they first
yeah.
come up because they're the best fielder at their college or high school or whatever or international. Yeah, there's a lot of options within this team, within this organization, but you're right. Perdomo is the guy. That's why he gets the contract extension. He's basically a coach on the field. He's in charge of setting the positioning of all the other players before each pitch. He sets guys in position, and they look to him for leadership. And he's still a young guy.
Yeah,
He's not a super old veteran or anything, but guys look to him for leadership.
yeah, Jerry's a stud. And then for left field, we have a revolving door again with guys including Corbin Carroll, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., Jake McCarthy, even Randall Grichuk played some left field recently. Who would you like to see come out the top the most? In my opinion, it's Lourdes because he played the best defense for several years since that Varsho trade.
Yeah, you're right. Gurriel doesn't get enough credit for his defense. He does what I call good route running. I know that's a football term, but we talk about it with Dave McKay, who's the outfielders coach as well, and he makes the correct move to the ball each and every time. That's why you'll see him make a lot of leaping plays in the outfield. He's not the kind of guy to have blazing speed, so he's got to make up for that somehow. So he does that really well. He's got good arm strength. Lourdes Gurriel Jr. will still play the most games in left field, but I do also feel that they have a lot more options now than they ever have before. If
Yeah,
Alec Thomas and Jake McCarthy are both on this team, you got to find a way to get those guys in the outfield
yeah,
consistently. And Jake McCarthy, who I just did my most recent podcast episode with this weekend, Jake is the only guy last year who the Diamondbacks had play all three outfield positions,
really?
left, right, and center. Corbin did not get into left, I don't think.
Because I
So
know
you
he
might,
was in right and center, so
yeah, you might check me on that. Maybe Corbin got into left field once or twice, but I think Jake was the only one that they asked to do that. So, um, you have a lot of options available to you. I think Grichuk would like to play some more of the outfield this year and not just be,
DH.
narrowed into the DH role. Yeah. So they have a lot of good options available to them.
And then moving on to center field, again, it's a bunch of players that we mentioned for everywhere else, including McCarthy, Alec Thomas, Corbin Carroll. With these like outfielders, I have a couple questions for you. We'll start with who do you want to see play center? Is it, can I guess who you're gonna go with if that's all right?
Give me a guess.
Alec Thomas, because he's great defense and he can swing it a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, look back at 2023 in the postseason run, and Alec Thomas was the starting center fielder for the Diamondbacks.
Dude, he
He made
saved
some
us against Craig Kimbrell.
Yeah, he had some memorable hits, the big home runs, especially in that NLCS in Philadelphia. I mean, he is one of the best fielders in the outfield in Major League Baseball. I still believe that. But here's the thing, Isaac, and I'm not saying Jake McCarthy should be the guy necessarily, but Jake last year was thrust into that role. And remember, he started in right field last year. He was a
Yeah,
Gold Glove nominee in right field, even though he became the starting center fielder for the Diamondbacks because when Alec Thomas got hurt, they moved Corbin Carroll from right to center.
yeah,
Then they switched him and Jake because they wanted Corbin to get as comfortable as he could in right field so that he could focus on hitting. Because remember,
hitting.
he had a slow start. Jake McCarthy earned that. And he had a 5-hit game in Pittsburgh or against Pittsburgh in late July. And then over the
Yeah,
next 3 weeks, he hit 450.
yeah.
So Jake, while he doesn't have a ton of pop, he's got kind of sneaky pop. Like when he hits home runs, they go
They go
far.
four. When he barrels
But
it
he
up, yeah.
but he doesn't hit them a lot. And I would think Alec has a little bit more power to his swing. But Jake is a high contact guy. He hits righties and lefties really well.
That
He
was the
deserves to
thing.
be out there.
Yeah, that was the thing that surprised me the most was not saying he's a bad player, but I remember in 23 when it was his rookie year, he crushed righties but not could not hit lefties. And this year, or last year, I guess in 24, teams were trying to give him the lefties to throw off his swing and stuff, but he hit lefties better than righties. So I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, I think it's a tight race there. And by the way, Jake McCarthy and Alec Thomas, they're best friends. They're
They all
really
kind of,
close.
yeah,
Yeah,
all the
so
players grew up in the minors together.
that's the thing. And I talked about it with Jake a little bit the other day is, it's a cool thing that they all kind of know each other super well. They all want each other to do their best. And Jake put it this way. He's like, you never want to root against a guy, but also it makes you feel like you don't believe in your own abilities. Like I
Yeah,
want Alec to be really, really good. And I want to be really good too and deserve to play over a guy who's really good. So it's certainly not personal between the two of them and all the other outfield spots as well. These guys just have a lot of talent.
for sure, yeah. But for the last half of that, you can answer as much as this if we have time left. What would you think about the possibility of like, let's say we're at the trade deadline, we're above the Dodgers or half a game back, because I think this Diamondbacks team is better than the Dodgers, um, at the trade deadline, and let's say we need a closer, and Torey Lovullo wants that one guy that's locked down that he can always count on. What would you think about the possibility of trading an outfielder like an Alec Thomas or even a McCarthy for a solid closer that we could get?
Wow, that's a big question. And I suppose I have less than a minute before I run out of this.
We can answer it over
Um,
there too if you want.
all right, let's do that. I'll answer it on the other side. Is that cool?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. All right, I'll see you there.
Bye.
Both of these guys are major league outfielders, in my opinion. It's just
Yeah,
that you never know, right? You don't know what's going to happen. So what happens if you send one of those guys down and they're not hitting all that well in AAA, God forbid? Now all of a sudden, are you moving
you
that
just need
guy
a good
for a
piece.
closer?
Yeah,
It's a hard sell. And if only one of them is playing well, you need that guy in the major leagues.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so I mean, I hate to skirt around your question like that, but If both guys are on the major league squad and they're playing well and you feel like you have a surplus and you can't get one of those guys on the field, then yeah, maybe you do try to look to make a good trade. It's what the Diamondbacks did with Dalton Varsho, right? Where
Yeah,
arguably he was their best player at the time. He hit 27 home runs. He was a Gold Glove finalist. He was a great player, and they turned around and traded him for Gabby Moreno, and Lourdes Gurriel Jr. was just a throw-in in that trade.
that
I would
trade
say the
worked out so
Diamondbacks,
well.
it worked out great. And so if you can find a deal like that that you think is worth it, totally, you go and make that move, especially if you're in contention. I totally agree with you, but I wouldn't be shocked to see them trade from, depth that they have in the minor leagues as well. But a trade like the one you're talking about, it might cost you major league talent. And so it is a possibility.
That's true. And then moving on to the catcher. So it's probably Gabby's position to lose like a bunch of other guys because he has a great bat. He hit a ball 456 feet. Like that was impressive. And then he's so good at controlling the run game. He blocks well. So I think it's Gabby's position to lose. But now with Gabby starting, the question is, do you start Adrian Del Castillo, who, like you said, hit above 300 last year and raked, or a guy that like has been proven and been with the team for a while, and Jose Herrera?
Yeah, it's another great question and one that they're certainly contemplating with the Diamondbacks right now. I think that ADC, as we call him, Adrian Del Castillo, he hit really, really well. Like you said, I don't have any doubts that he is the better hitter between him and Jose Herrera.
Herrera has better defense, though, I think.
Herrera's better defense, and also too, he's earned the respect. Oh, no worries. Jose Herrera has earned the respect of his pitching staff. They like throwing to him. If there's a day, let's say it's a day game, like a Wednesday, right? A lot
Yeah,
of the times they'll sit Gabby because just having him catch 2 days in a row, like, at night and then in the morning, it's hard. It's hard to do that 2 days in a row. So
catching
they'll
is a taxing position.
Right. So Jose Herrera, the pitching staff, I've talked with a lot of them about Jose, and it's like having Gabby out there defensively. No, it's not quite the arm, it's not quite the glove, it's not nearly the bat,
Yeah,
but they feel comfortable with him. He's been here for a long time in this organization, even if it doesn't, it hasn't been at the majors all that much. He also played in that postseason run, so I think
yeah.
that is sort of a statement of support in his case. I still think Adrian Del Castillo is going to play meaningful innings for the Diamondbacks behind the plate this year. They're devoting a lot of time and coaching to getting him up to speed defensively because they want him out there. Because if he can get,
He's a
I don't know,
good bat.
300 at bats, that's a really good hitter.
Yeah,
So I know it's another way of skirting the question, but right now, I also know that Jose Herrera, I believe, is out of minor league options, which means they can't send him to
send him
Reno.
down.
They'd have to put him on waivers. And I'm guessing because of what we just talked about, somebody would want that guy on their team. And then all of a sudden you're down to two catchers and you don't really have a great third option. Rene Pinto might be a guy.
We
So
got
they
him
might
from
be
the
forced.
Rays, right?
I don't remember exactly where he ended up coming from, but yeah, I mean, they picked him up this offseason. They kind of changed up their organizational depth at catcher behind those top three guys. So maybe to avoid losing Herrera, which they might if they put him on waivers, I would think maybe they start him this year in the major leagues.
Ooh. And then for our last outfield position, in right field, I mean, we have Carroll, and like we mentioned earlier, Alec Thomas, Jake McCarthy, Lourdes, if he wants to play there. In my opinion, I would like to see Carroll because I feel like once they, like you mentioned earlier, once they moved him to right and he actually settled down, he remembered how to hit and just went bonkers in the last couple months, even won a Player of the Month.
Yeah, bingo. You nailed it. I remember I asked Torey Lovello very specifically. I was like, "Hey, why did you switch Corbin back to right field and move Jake to center?" And that was the answer. He said, "We wanted to make sure Dave McKay, the outfielders coach, wanted to make sure Corbin Carroll focused on being the best right fielder possible. He could play any spot in the outfield.
He's so
Um,
athletic.
yeah, he could play anywhere out there, and he has over the course of his career, but they want him to focus on right field and be the top guy. And he's one of the best players in the game of baseball, especially after what he did in the second half last year. So that's his position. He'll be there nearly every day. And when he's not, I do think that you're going to see some Randall Grichuk this year in right field. If Alec Thomas and Jake McCarthy are both on the team, I imagine you'll see Jake a lot in right field as well, a position that, again, he was a Gold Glove finalist in right field last year. So they've got a ton of options available to them, but Corbin Carroll will be in right field most days.
Cool. So now onto the DH spot. What do you think they're gonna do there? Because we had a great platoon system last year in Randall Grichuk, who crushed lefties, and then Jock Peterson, who crushed righties. They kind of flip-flopped each other's strengths, but Jock left to the Rangers. So do you think, like you said earlier, it's gonna be like a Ketel Marte, some guys, and then you can put Del Castillo if he's not catching, even like an outfield piece that might not be playing, like Alec Thomas or McCarthy. What do you think they're gonna do in that DH spot?
Yeah, again, ton of options, right? So I asked Mike Hazen, the general manager, this exact question a couple of days ago on the podcast, dbacks.tv, if you want to go check that
Dude, I'm
out.
gonna check that out. Your podcast seems sick.
Well, I appreciate it, man. You tell me what you think of it. So I asked him about that because you're right. The platoon worked really well last year.
Yeah.
By wins above replacement, I'm sure you're familiar with that statistic.
War, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they had the fifth best WAR at DH in all of baseball last year. The only
That
guys
was,
that were higher were the Dodgers that had Ohtani and Brent Rooker with the
dude, he
Athletics,
went
and
bonkers. That's
yeah, they were
crazy though,
great.
because they were DH in 23 was not a strong suit for them.
No, because they didn't have the depth and they didn't have
Yeah.
guys to move over there. They needed players at third base where Evan Longoria was, and the outfield was a little bit thinner as well. They didn't have, everything figured out. So to answer your question, this is what will likely happen. Randall Grichuk will still be in that same role. He'll be a DH slash outfielder. Whenever there's a lefty starter on the mound, Grichuk will be playing. He'll be starting
Crushes
somewhere.
lefties, so that makes sense.
Whether it's DH or in the outfield, he'll be in there somewhere. Lourdes Gurriel Jr. will also be in the lineup somewhere. Now, as you mentioned earlier, maybe there's an opportunity for him to get some DH days, but he'll likely be in left field a lot too, because you have all these left-handed outfielders, Corbin Carroll,
Yeah.
Alec Thomas, Jake McCarthy. Jake is the one that hits lefties the best. I could see him in center when there's a left-handed starter. But Corbin Carroll is still obviously going to play a lot as well when there's lefties on the mound. So um, Grichuk will get a lot of those opportunities. And then against right-handed pitching, Pavin Smith is going to be asked to play the role of Jock Peterson this year.
I'm not gonna lie, I forgot about Pavin, but he's a great bat.
So my prediction, and I don't know that this is a wild prediction, he's going to make the team out of
Yeah.
spring training, and he'll be asked to primarily be the DH against righties. If you go back and look at his stats last year against right-handed pitching, a lot of the rate stats like batting average and on base percentage and OPS, they're almost identical to Jock's in
Really?
terms of the rate stats. So like he hit 290 plus against righties, so did Jock. The OPS against righties were pretty similar. Now, the thing that Jock did better was he got walked more, but Pavin doesn't have a problem with walking. He's got
Yeah.
really good at
He
bats.
has
They
great
love
patient
his
at
vision.
bats.
Yeah, he's super patient. So he's going to be asked to fill that role. I think he's going to take a big step up this year offensively because he's going to get to play more. And if he fits that role really well, you're going to see him in the fifth, sixth, seventh slot in this lineup and crushing some right-handed pitching. But again, they're going to have a lot of options. Ketel Marte could get DH days to try to keep him a little bit more fresh and try to avoid those injuries. The same could be said of Gino Suarez, who doesn't like to take days off and could probably play third base every single day. But Torey Lovello has a hard job, and every manager in baseball has a hard job of keeping guys fresh because playing every day for 190 days straight or whatever it is the season, it's a lot to ask.
For sure, yeah. So now on to the pitching side. Like we mentioned earlier in the rotation, you have Burns, Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Eduardo Rodriguez, Jordan Montgomery, Brian Nelson, Brandon Pfaadt. Even like a guy, we're probably not going to need him because we have so many rotations, but like a guy like Christian Mena in the minors, they have a ton of starters. My only question for you, because we kind of covered it earlier, is if you're Torey Lovello on March 26th or 7th, whenever their first opening day is, who are you giving the ball to? The Corbin Burns, your new star free agent, or Zach Gallen, who it might be his last year because he's a Boris client and we might not have that money to pay him.
Yeah, it's a great question, Isaac, and one that I've certainly been wondering about. If you go and look at the days that Zach Gallen has been pitching in spring training, they line up for opening day.
Oh,
That doesn't
really?
mean Yeah, and that doesn't mean that he's, guaranteed locked to pitch opening day. He's certainly pitched, the last couple of opening days for the Diamondbacks. This is
Yeah,
now his seventh season with this organization. Hard to believe already. But like you said, high priced free agent, 200 plus $1 million for Corbin
yeah,
Burns. The guy certainly has earned that right to pitch on opening day as well. Here's what I would do. I don't know what the team's going to do. That's a very difficult decision, but here's what I would do. I think, it's kind of like have you ever heard the phrase tie goes to the runner? And like
yeah.
it's
And our
it's
close play.
it's not a real rule, but we all kind of just abide by it. I think you give opening day to Zach Gallen, and here's
Really?
why. He's been doing it for the Diamondbacks for a while. I think he's earned that as kind of the leader of this rotation. And also, here's the other thing: the message you send by giving it to Gallen, I think, is stronger than the message you would send by giving it to Burns. If you let Burns pitch on opening day, I think it's great and everyone's going to enjoy it. But I think the message there is he's the future, which he is. There's no doubt about that. But
Yeah,
you're basically, what are you telling Zach Gallen? I
we
don't
don't
think he
want
would
you
take it
here.
personally. I really don't. But I think the message you can send by having Gallen do it is it's Burns' way of, even though he's not making the choice himself, it's his way of acknowledging this is your team, this is your rotation. I want to be a part of it. I'm going to win game two when we pitch on the second night of the season. And then think about this from, like the team business side. Game one, opening day, it's always a big deal no matter who pitches, right? So
Yeah,
Zach Gallen gets that game. Everyone's going to be excited. We're going to have 50,000 people in the stadium. Game two, Corbin Burns' debut as an Arizona Diamondback.
dude,
That's
that's
almost as
big.
big. It's almost as big of a vibe as opening day.
Yeah,
And so then game three, fan favorite Merrill Kelly pitches in game three. Like that just feels right to me to go Gallen, Burns, Kelly. And then, like you said, if Zach Gallen's future is somewhere else, which I don't know the answer to that question, then Corbin Burns becomes the starting pitcher on opening day next year, and no one's hurt by that. So,
dude, this is a great
um,
problem to have.
yeah, it's an awesome problem. I know Torey Lovello has not been he's not been looking forward to having to make this decision because there is always the possibility of hurting someone's feelings. But I got to tell you, from everything I've seen from these two guys, they do not care who's pitching what game. They care about winning. And so for that reason, for me, I'm going Gallen in game one to basically to say thank you for all these great years he's given us, no matter
Yeah,
what the future looks like. And then let's focus on Corbin Burns in game two and let's make that game all about him.
heck yeah. Speaking of our new star, Corbin Burns, if you don't mind me asking, could you share your reaction when we first signed Burns?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I was on vacation. It was a couple
Oh,
days
really?
after Christmas, if I remember
It
right.
was the 27th, I believe. The
Yeah. So
28th.
I was in Dallas, Texas at my parents' house. We were kind of doing like a late Christmas with our family. And I saw the tweet like everyone else did on Twitter for the most part. I did not know that was coming. I had no clue they were talking to Corbin Burns. My reaction was the same as most. It's a perennial Cy Young candidate. He's going to be a top 5 to 10 pitcher in the game of baseball. I anticipate he will be that for the years to come with the Diamondbacks. It's massive. There's no other way to say
Yeah,
it. And in the context of what happened last year, we talked about 344 days on the IL between those five
that's so
starters.
crazy.
If nothing else, Corbin Burns provides stability now in the short term and also in the future because he's going to be here, for the next 5, 6 years, whatever. And so it's amazing. It really fits. And I know for a fact that this organization did not think they were in the market for a starting pitcher,
No
high
one did.
level
We
or
had
low
six
level.
already, good ones.
Yeah, when the number one starting pitcher comes to you and says, I want to be an Arizona Diamondback, you at least have to have that conversation. And
Yeah,
normally that conversation is going to end with, let's find a way to do this.
for sure. Yeah. Um, So I have a little bit of a crazy reaction. So I was off of school at that point for break. I normally play the home phone as we call it in the office, but I slept with it next to my bed that night for some reason. And I didn't put it on Do Not Disturb. So I wake up at like 1:30, whatever time it was, to four missed calls from my dad, three unread text messages, and then I saw the ESPN alert and I thought it was fake.
Yeah, I don't blame you. It was one of those things that came out of nowhere. It very much reminds me of the Zach Greinke situation a few
Yeah.
years back. Obviously, the contract is similar, for years and dollars and all those things. He's going to be at the front end of the rotation for years, like Greinke was. But also too, it just kind of came out of nowhere. Like you didn't
Yeah,
really know the Diamondbacks were in the market for Zach
there was
Greinke.
no rumors.
No, and so it felt very similar. I can't blame you at all for not thinking that it was real at first. It's like the Luka Doncic trade, right?
Yeah,
Like
that
we
was
all kind of
crazy
looked at it like
too.
that doesn't make sense.
Especially when we had Zach Gallen already in that rotation with Kelly, Erod. It surprised me a little bit.
Yeah.
And now onto the bullpen. Again, we have nasty pitchers, Kevin Ginkel, AJ Puk, Ryan Thompson, even a guy that I don't think gets enough credit, who made an all-star team a couple years ago, Joe Mantiply, Justin Martinez, who throws cheddar. Um, Actually, I think we released him now that I think about it, but Scott McGuff.
Scott McGuff, he was here in camp, so I'm not sure what the latest was on that, but yeah, he was in the mix the last couple of years. I don't think he's on a team right now.
I think he got released, but I could be tripping.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of guys there for sure that you
Yeah,
mentioned, and they have more options now than even last year. I mean, if I remember right, out of camp last year, this team carried a couple of guys that were right on the edge of the roster. Luis Frias was a guy that was in the
yeah.
clubhouse. Miguel Castro was still around at the time. Vieira was in the bullpen at one
He just
point
got
during the
injured, right,
season.
with Tommy John?
Yeah, unfortunately he did, and that's a real shame because I think he's got some really good stuff too. But
They're on the
um,
rise in baseball. It's so sad though, because I feel like every time you go on the internet, another star pitcher is blowing out their elbow.
Well, and that's part of the reason that organizations, not just the Diamondbacks, but around the game, are stockpiling these guys. It's why the Diamondbacks haven't traded one of their seven starting pitchers yet,
Yeah,
because, not that they're anticipating somebody's going to get hurt. You never want that to happen, but what did they see last year? It happens, and if it happens to enough guys, then you start running low.
yeah,
So I asked Mike Hazen the other day about, who are you keeping an eye on that maybe most people aren't, hoping he would give me a name of a young player that maybe I should pay more attention to. And he said, most of my focus is on that AAA rotation. Diaz, we
mm.
talked about, Blake Walston, Tommy Henry. There's a couple guys I'm
Gilbert.
forgetting. Say again.
You said Gilbert, right?
Yeah, Gilbert Diaz.
Is it Gilbert or Gilbert?
Well, I mean, I'm trying to be as accurate as I can. I believe the Y sound in Hispanic countries is pronounced with a J, but we call him Gilbert, but I don't think he gets offended when people call him Gilbert. Um, so yeah, there's a bunch of guys waiting in the wings in AAA. Mena, you mentioned as well earlier.
Yeah,
Like those are guys they're keeping a close eye on because they all made appearances last year in the major leagues, and a lot of them, they could again this year. As crowded as this rotation is, you got to have depth because of what you're talking about. Guys are going to go down at some point. It happens.
yeah, for sure. And then for the last question I'll have for you, uh, including like a notable thing out of spring. Corbin Carroll started out the season last year uh slowly. You could say it was his shoulder he popped out or whatever it was, or he didn't have his feet under him. But this year in spring training, if you look at his different swings, his bat is more like upright and it kind of looks like a little bit like Ohtani, and he's hitting 3 homers with a 1,000 OPS. Do you think this is the year Corbin Carroll goes on to win MVP?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. It's hard, right? Because think about those other guys that are gonna.
Ohtani.
Yeah, I mean, Otani's always going to do something amazing. And by the way, Otani's going to be pitching this year too. So that adds another element to it. I don't know that I would put Corbin Carroll as number one on my MVP list, but I certainly think that if he plays like he did the second half of last year for a full 6 months, then yeah, we're definitely talking about a guy who's in that conversation. Cattell is still obviously really, really
Yeah.
good, and he missed a month of the season last year and was still
Finished second.
easily the best second baseman in the
Yeah.
game. So, I mean, if we're talking about an MVP season, I would probably lean Cattell more than Corbin. But to your point, yeah, if he makes adjustments the way that it appears he made mid-season, and then the way that he's kind of adjusted his swing this spring, which you're right, it is visually different. He doesn't like to
Yeah.
talk about it either, which is kind of funny because it's all pretty clear to us that he's doing it, but he doesn't want to tip his hand, I think, a little bit. And, for him, he's the hardest working guy I've seen in a lot
He's
of
so
ways.
nice
Like,
too.
Oh, he's the best. And last year it was tough because, he struggled for those first 2 months. And, a lot of guys wanted to just kind of be hands off. Like I didn't even want to talk to him for those 2 months because I was like, I don't want to get in his way. I want him
Yeah,
to do whatever he can to be his best. And he was in the cage constantly. They have a batting cage down behind the dugout at Chase
dude, that's
Field.
cool.
And so he's in there constantly. A lot of the guys are obviously down there hitting, but he put in the work to earn the level of play he had last year in the second half. I think a lot of people forget he ended the year with over 120 runs scored.
Dude,
Like
that's crazy after a slow
insane.
2 months.
Yeah, I think he hit like 200 in the first 2 months, and then he still scored 120 runs. So credit to the rest of the team. Obviously, he plays in a great lineup that was driving him in a lot of the time. He is the best base runner in the game of baseball,
Yeah,
which sounds like kind of a simple thing, but he's not just fast. I mean, if you go and look, I was reading an article from Fangraphs a couple weeks ago about how he makes the
Fangraphs is my
best
favorite
outs.
website.
Oh, it's the best.
Sorry, I did not mean to cut you off.
No, 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 it's okay. The article was about how he makes the best outs in baseball, meaning even when he grounds out, he ain't gonna ground into a double play because they don't have time to get him at first base.
Yeah,
Or if he has runners on scoring position, he's not gonna strike out. He's not gonna pop up in the infield. Like he makes progressive outs. He makes productive outs. And so I know it sounds silly almost, but like even when he's not doing things like a home run or getting a hit or driving in a run, like he's finding a way to impact the game on the base paths, and that is massive.
for sure. Yeah. So the thing with me with Carroll's MVP, I think if we see the 2023 Corbin Carroll, where it was hit a single, steal second, third, because you're too fast, you can't catch me, then I think he's going to be a phenomenal player, but maybe a top five in MVP. But if we see the 24 second half Carroll, where he was crushing the ball, hitting more home runs, he didn't even steal, he's still like 20 or 30, but it wasn't that many stolen bases. So if we see that Carroll from last year, second half, then he has a chance to win it. So it depends on the Carroll we see.
Yeah, and MVP, I totally agree with you. He's in that conversation at his best. MVP sometimes can just go to the guy who, puts together crazy statistics. Ronald
Yeah.
Acuna Jr., what did he steal over 70 bases when he won MVP a few years
72,
ago?
40 homers.
Yeah, so
1 billion
it's
something.
like, some guys they can kind of almost pad their case by just swiping as many bags as possible. Corbin was selective with his stolen bases last year. He was
Yeah.
not. There were a lot of times where people were like, "Why don't you just go and steal second?" Well, what you might not realize is that teams are now accustomed to him trying to steal bases,
It was kind of
and
like the Phillies series in the NLCS where the team kind of slowed their running to be careful.
yeah, they're doing everything they can, whether it's back throws from the catcher to first base or, step off moves. There's obviously new rules in place that help the runners, but it
Yeah,
also can be manipulated by the pitching staff. So I think people just adjusted to Corbin, and that's why he struggled so much offensively in the first couple months. But yeah, I mean, if he's at his best like he was in the summer last year, I don't think that there's a lot of better outfielders in the game of baseball.
for sure. So that's all the questions I have for you. I'm gonna end this and then I want to ask.
Got it. Totally.
So I just wanted to take this moment and say thank you for joining me. This was super cool and I'll use what you told me in the future.
Oh, dude, I appreciate it, Isaac. I was thrilled when you asked me to join you. So this is a really cool opportunity. I love your operation. Keep interviewing people, man. That is awesome. And I will listen to you anytime.
Cool, thank you.
All right, Isaac.
Then I have one last thing for you really quick. So if you're good with this, I want to do this with you during the All-Star break if you're free, so we can talk kind of midway through the season, and then hopefully right before the playoffs if we're in, and then we can talk about the upcoming series and who we're playing and just the roster at that moment.
Yeah, man, hit me up. Totally.
Cool.
All-star break. We should be good to go. We got a lot of free time around that period. So I'd be happy to chat with you anytime, man. You let me know.
All right, thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
All right, Isaac. I'll see you, man.
Bye.